Hey everyone, Jim Coventry from RotoWire here, going through this week's top 5 AFC fantasy football trends. Number 5, what is wrong with the Broncos offense? So the first thing I see is what we learned about Russell Wilson, and I've known this over the years, kind of talked about it. Russell Wilson used to count on dynamic athleticism to extend plays with his legs. He had the ability to run, and as he would let a play break down for the defense over a period of seconds, things would open up and he can create explosives off of those. But then once the Rams kind of figured out 2 years ago about putting a shell over the top, they were one of the teams that began to do some of the too high looks before last year became really, really prominent. Russell Wilson had a big implosion game, and then teams started treating him that way when they saw the film. And so he had a really slow finish to let Russ cook beginning of that season. And then last season, we can write off some of the season to the broken finger he had, and he came back early from the injury. But then what we didn't really notice was when he was healthy, maybe toward the end, maybe his struggles were no longer the finger. It was the fact that defenses kind of figured him out. Here are the problems that we have. So what Russell Wilson has going from now, he's in Denver, and we were optimistic that things would work well. But we're seeing some of the same problems. Who is he connecting with? We said it early in the season, the preseason. We knew it would be Courtland Sutton because Courtland Sutton is a player, despite not having blazing speed, he can win downfield. And that is where ultimately Russell Wilson likes to go. Now, Sutton has had double-digit targets in the last 2 games, at least 97 yards in each of those games. So that is definitely great. And he's drawn some DPIs as well. So there's yardage that, the team has gained, but he hasn't put on the stat sheet. But that's the thing. That's what Russell Wilson connects with. And we're already seeing it now. He's not looking to the intermediate area of the field. First of all, we always talk about his height issues that realistically it's hard for him to see in the near to the line of scrimmage area over the middle. He doesn't have a good sight line there. So he always has been inclined to go to the perimeter. So Jerry Jeudy can run great routes and work his way open in the middle of the field. But can Russ always see him? And B, Russ doesn't seem inclined to want to throw there anyway. He may do it in practice, but it seems like when we get into the game situation, Russ always goes to what he knows, and hence Courtland Sutton is doing quite well. Now, Albert Okwuegbunam, we're very concerned about him. So in the last 2 games ago, 53% snap share. That wasn't bad. He went down to 32% in this past game against the 49ers. 2 targets in each game. His total production in those games, 1 catch for 12 yards. If they're going to run him on typical tight end routes, he falls into the same bracket with Jerry Jeudy. The talk in the preseason was that Albert O would be running routes from all over the formation. And that is how they need to weaponize him, because they can put him split out on one side if they stack the receivers on the other. And they can get him as linebackers and safeties and use him on routes that are more perimeter based. But until they do that, he is maybe having a lost fantasy season. And then the other problem is Javonte Williams is getting a lot of carries, and we know his broken tackle rate is great, but in the last 2 games, his 30 carries have been 133 yards, which is nice. We love that, but just 4 catches for 12 yards after he had a lot of targets in the opener. So he's caught 4 of 9 targets. So when we look at the production in the last 2 games, PPR-wise, we're looking at about 18, 19 points, and that's over 2 games. That's not what we were banking on as fantasy managers. And so we want more robust receiving production, and we know Russ has had some success with screens on occasion in his time in Seattle, but it was never a staple of his game. And we knew in week 1 they dumped 14 targets to running backs. But ultimately, it doesn't seem like those are the passes he's great at. He doesn't necessarily lead his running back into space. So it's possible that this offense can get a little bit of a boost with more time and maybe a bye week down the road where they can figure some things out. But I'm not even sure that's going to be the situation. Russell Wilson may just be trying to do some things in a league that is designed to take away the things that he does best. So I am a little bit nervous right now about the entire offense. And number 4, and I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday in the highlight show, but we're going to just take a little different tack on this one. So I made this number 4 instead of number 1. Can the Ravens offense be stopped? So Lamar Jackson, 2 straight 100-yard rushing games. He's had 3 or 4 passing touchdowns in each game. But here's what I want to add today. This is part of the storyline. Patriots tried to blitz him. Teams have tried to blitz him. That was normally a kryptonite for Lamar Jackson. He's beating it. He sees zone. That's been common, right? Teams that want to play man against him, you can't, because once they turn their backs, he runs. But the teams are playing zone and teams are having success. Not this year. He is shredding it. He's beating zone. And it's largely with Mark Andrews, occasionally with explosives, especially the Rashad Bateman. But basically, Lamar Jackson right now is looking like that 2019 MVP version. And I don't know if this offense can be stopped anytime soon, because I don't think defense are going to have an answer for Lamar Jackson the way he's playing right now. Number 3, here come the Browns. So the Browns are very concentrated, and we know that we're not expecting a ton out of Jacoby Brissett as a quarterback, but they're basically narrowing things down. And again, I know Kareem Hunt is involved. He's an excellent player and getting some production. But Nick Chubb, we often get games where he doesn't get more than 17 carries. You look back at the box scores last year, we'll see a couple games at over 20. In 3 games, he already has 2 games of 22 or 23 carries. And when Nick Chubb gets that volume, we love that, because we know eventually the big plays are coming. Nick Chubb looks great through 2 games, and the blocking has been very good. They've dealt with some short-term injuries, but for the most part, the line looks to be in good shape right now, and they're definitely leveraging that into some great Nick Chubb production. And Amari Cooper, we worried in week 1 when he saw 6 targets to the 11 for Donovan Peoples-Jones, but in the last 2 games, Peoples-Jones is like disappeared. He's not getting hardly any targets. Amari seeing double-digit targets, 2 straight 100-yard games, scoring touchdowns. And what I like is, we talked about Nick Chubb earlier, they're leveraging their play action. Amari Cooper is an excellent route runner, and they're running him a lot on crossers and just short in-breaking routes to allow him to go to the sweet spot for Jacoby Brissett, which are in those areas of the field. So it's really a good stylistic matchup. So I definitely think Amari Cooper is here to stay. Does he get 100 yards every week? No, but he definitely is going to be that wide receiver 1 for them. And I think he has been a steal in fantasy drafts. And I don't know that after 2 good games, I doubt he's going to be very attainable for a fair price in trade. David Njoku, I know we had the big games, so I'm not just bringing him up because of that. But what we saw was his targets went from 1 to 5 to 10. It was almost like as Donovan Peoples-Jones targets went down over the 3 games, Njoku's went up. And I know it was game plan specific how he beat the Steelers up, but it's possible that they're going to utilize him, because, again, the middle of the field is where Jacoby Brissett is at his best. And if the coaching staff figure that out, Peoples-Jones will run a little more on the outside. Not that he can't work over the middle, but Njoku is natural because he starts there as a tight end, and Cooper gets there because of his precise route running. So this could become, again, we're not going to see that huge game like the Steelers game out of Njoku, but we could see consistent, strong fantasy production from him if they make him that number 2 option in the attack. Now, this all could go through, into a weird state when I'm just going to say the other guy comes back to play quarterback in week 12. And so when he comes into play, the offense could change. But again, I think it's going to be more pass heavy. So is there really a loser there, right? Number 2. The Chargers have to figure some things out. Now, they lost their left tackle, Rashawn Slater. He's probably done for the season. Terrible blow to them. The 1 weak link in their offensive line was their right tackle spot. Now their left tackle spot's a weak link. And what came into the season is what was expected to be an outstanding line with 4/5 being outstanding. The ends are now a problem for that. And I also want to point out that was kind of gone quietly under the radar. Austin Eckler, who gets at least like 4.5 yards per carry every year of his career. It's only 3 games, 32 carries, 2.5 yards per carry. I talked about this, and one of the things I said was I was worried about him as a first-round fantasy pick because it was this heavy usage season for a small dude. He was begging for help, like bring in players to help lessen the load. Those seasons, big seasons for players, take miles off the tires. That you come back the next year, not the same. Now, Eckler certainly didn't have a Derrick Henry workload, but for a dude his size, it was a massive workload, by far the biggest of his career. And right now, he does not look like the same explosive Austin Eckler. Can that change next week? Sure, he's Austin Eckler. But there's a possibility that the damage that was done last season, it may be a down year for him. Mike Williams is next. It's not an enigma because we saw it last year. So Mike Williams started out 2020, red hot in the beginning, getting him targets, converting. Middle of the season, they totally went away from him, and he faded away, and fantasy managers couldn't want to imagine what was wrong. And then down the stretch, they started getting him the ball back more, and all of a sudden, good things were happening. So it was a logical conclusion that the coaching staff figured it out, that, well, Mike Williams is going to be involved because they realize when they use him, he's very good. The offense is better. Well, I guess they didn't figure things out. They figured him out in week 2 against Kansas City when he went 8 for $113 and a touchdown. In the other 2 games, 2 for 10 on 4 targets. Last week, he did catch a touchdown. His only catch of the game, 15 yards. So look, until this coaching staff figures out that Mike Williams needs at least 10 targets a game, and I understand Justin Herbert's ribs were hurt. I get that. But the usage was similar to what it was in week 1. And so that's a problem. They need to make him a focal point of that offense because he is the only receiver, and Jalen Guyton has a long-term injury. I think he's done for the season. Well, Mike Williams is the only guy, and I know he's not a fast dude, but he's the only guy who can win consistently downfield at the receiver position, and they need him to be a part of that offense, but the coaching staff does not inspire confidence right now. Now, Gerald Everett, we know he had 2 really good games. He only has caught 11 of 20 targets. It's the 8th percentile catch rate. And that's the problem. Gerald Everett has a ton of talent, but why have 2 teams let him go? Inconsistency. And so when he catches the ball, he's great. But can we count on him? And at some point, if he's only going to catch half of the passes, is Justin Herbert going to get fed up and stop throwing the ball his way? That's a possibility. Donald Parham has been out with an injury. If he comes back, he could get in that mix and take away work from Everett. Now, Herbert's still working through the rib injury, the tackles. He's without his regular tackles. The one thing that helps them is the flaw in the offense is that they threw short too much, but maybe till his ribs heal up, it actually may be good for him. Now, they know they lost last week, but the Jaguars, maybe they're coming on in their AFC story number 1. Here come the Jaguars. So Trevor Lawrence, 5 touchdowns over his last 2 games. Christian Kirk, we already know he's averaging 89 yards, at least 72 in every game, 3 touchdowns already. Zay Jones, the game he didn't do anything. It was a 24-0 shutout over the Colts. They didn't need him, right? But in the other 2 games, 6 for 65, 10 for 85 and a touchdown. Zay Jones may not be a great wide receiver, but he has an emerging quarterback who's reading the field real well. He's going through his progressions, and Trevor Lawrence is winning. Zay Jones is going to see volume. He is their clear number 2, and he is going to get work. So he is not going away. If he's still crazily on some waiver wires, he shouldn't be. Now, if it's an 8-team league, you don't need him. But if you're in a 12-team league or more, if Zay Jones on the waiver wire, you've got to end that trend and roster him. And then James Robinson, what more do we say, right? He scored in each game. His yardage total 69, 78, 116. So the floor is great. His touches, he's already had a 15 touch, a 25 touch. I think and the other number I don't have in front of me is over 20 touches in 2 games. He is getting feature back usage. Travis Etienne's getting change of pace usage with some receiving game work. But James Robinson, look, he may not have dynamic explosiveness right now, but when he gets in the open field, he just gets downhill and he goes. He had that long touchdown against the Chargers. James Robinson, until further notice, is going to continue to cash the checks for fantasy managers. If you like this content, if you're watching on YouTube, please smash the like and subscribe buttons. I appreciate you and that you're here. If you like our content at RotoWire, get 2 days behind the paywall free at RotoWire. No credit card needed, just an email address. Go to rotowire.com/try. Let's see what questions are sitting here. Chris, all right, what do you got, Chris? You've got click that right. Do you think James Robinson true? Yeah, he is. He is. Usage, the team trusts him. He runs the plays as designed. He's not going away. And, undrafted, he is a excellent football player. And those qualities are not going away. He's not slowing down right now. If anything, he's getting healthier, right? From the Achilles, if that was the problem. And Chris, yeah, true RB1. Yep, exactly. He is, in RB1, with so many running backs disappointing, because you're saying top 12, it's very hard to say top 12. He's producing right now at that level. At worst, top 15, right? With that kind of usage and his talent and his production. Yeah, I think so. Steven, would I pick up Trevor Lawrence and drop Myers or Elijah Moore? So picking up Trevor Lawrence is a good idea if you need a quarterback. If, depending who you have, if you need him, you should roster him. I do want to caution dropping Elijah Moore. Joe Flacco has taken a preference to Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson is supposed to come back this week. I fully expect Zach Wilson will go heavily to Elijah Moore. They established a rapport last year. They did click very well together. Elijah Moore has had targets, so it's not like he's been completely ignored, but I do think there could be a chemistry thing here. And so I would wait to see if Elijah Moore is going to click again with Zach Wilson. Now, Jacoby Myers is tough to drop, right? Because he produces a floor every week. Doesn't have a great ceiling, but in a PPR league, he's getting you those 14 points, and that's invaluable. But between Elijah Moore and Myers, here's what I'll tell you. If the floor of Myers is fine, but Elijah Moore may hit that ceiling. If he hits that ceiling, you're going to be frustrated that you didn't have him on your roster. But if you think he's not going to hit that, if you think it's already the Garrett Wilson show, well, then you might consider dropping him. But over those two, I would drop Myers. I would, if there's anything else on your team you could drop, I would do that instead. Both are very valuable. But again, I just see the upside there. And then Chris, at this point, so good question about Brady. Is Brady a waiver wire play? So not necessarily. So the biggest problem right now is the lack of health at wide receiver. Mike Evans was suspended the last game. Now, maybe it's a blessing in disguise. He had a calf issue. That week off may have gotten him better. Julio Jones apparently could have played last week, but again, they're thinking about long term. And so they held him out, and apparently he fell on his knee a couple weeks ago. This is one of those weird things, right? And so apparently he's going to be good to go in week 4. Assuming Chris Godwin, they said it wasn't a long-term injury, but if once they get those 3 back, we know the line's a problem, but it isn't like the New England days. In the New England days, if you got middle pressure on Brady, Brady was in trouble. But the thing was, he only had one receiver who could win quickly underneath, and it wasn't like like Julian Edelman, and it wasn't like Edelman was gonna I know he had great games and all that, but it wasn't like he was gonna shred opposing defenses. So, but the difference here is you got Evans, Godwin, Julio, and then Gage is your number 4. Now, if you line 3 or 4 of those players up and your offensive line is good, all 4 of them, again, if Gage is the number 4 and facing a really weak corner, all 4 of them can win immediately. That mitigates the line issue because Brady can get the ball out to high-level receivers quickly. But so assuming the receivers get healthy in the next 3 weeks, Brady will be back to being a high-end fantasy player because he'll have those options. Right now, they're just way too limited with the injuries on the line and at receiver. But right now, you're not going to play Brady for a couple weeks. I think it's going to take a couple weeks. But I think, again, with Evans and Julio back this week, they could be starting to get back as early as this week. It'll really be Godwin that really changes the equation. Randy's in the house. All right, Randy, does Greg Dortch's usage peak to Rondale? No. I think it's just right now Dortch is kind of playing Rondale Moore's role because Rondale Moore is hurt. Rondale Moore is far more explosive. Dortch has been available. He gets open, and so they're throwing bucks. They have nobody else. AJ Green doesn't have a whole lot left in the tank, and it took a little time to get Marquise Brown acclimated, but they're down and they're throwing, and so they need multiple targets. And Zach Ertz, as much as I love him, he's a great PPR fantasy play. He isn't that much juice left. He's getting, his aging is getting to be a problem. But last year, in the first 2 games, Rondale Moore was a beast, and then the team stopped using him well. The coach talked about it in the offseason, how they got away from using Rondale Moore's strengths. Rondale Moore is part of the solution. Greg Dortch is a producer for fantasy, but he's not part of the solution. He's not somebody that's going to change the face of defenses. If they can weaponize Rondale Moore and get his explosiveness, it gives them an element that they desperately need, especially for when they get DeAndre Hopkins back, because they're only 3 more games away, and then they'll have him back. And if they can get Rondale back, that's going to be very good. Now, I think there's a world where if AJ Green is injured, which I know he is in the knee, if he's out, Dortch and Rondale Moore can play. And they were practicing the actual air raid offense in the preseason with DeAndre Hopkins because they had 4 receivers they could line up. Now, in that case, if they want to run now, they could run that with Rondale and Dortch in the slot. DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown outside, and that could be a really good one. You know what, Randy? I actually have a great Thursday night game thing. I'm going to film it right after this. So as soon as I'm done, just hang on. Then I can talk about what you have on there. So I'm going to cover that. So let me get to that actually. And everybody, again, smash that like button, subscribe on YouTube if you're there. Appreciate you. Everybody have a great day, and we will talk soon.